I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, 5 Secrets for Improving Your Charity Auction Timeline. Today is part 2, all about live auctions. Some of you may have joined us for part 1 on silent auctions, which was a great webinar we did last month. For those of you who missed it, definitely let us know. We'll have our email address and contact information at the end. We'd love to send you that one as well. But today is all about live auctions. So let's get started. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get to the slides. All attendees are going to be on mute throughout the broadcast. Webinar slides will be distributed, webinar slides will not be distributed, but a video version will be sent out via email. If you have any questions, make sure you type them into the questions section of the toolbar that you'll see over on the right side. And we're going to have a lengthy Q&A session at the end of the webinar, which is always very fruitful. So we encourage you to stick around for that. Go ahead and live tweet us at WinspireMe or at SR Auctioneers using the hashtag auction timeline. We'll be following along with that. So again, don't hesitate to ask those questions. We have someone following along that might be able to answer those as they come in, but we'll be sure to also discuss them during the Q&A session at the very end. As far as our guest, I'd like to welcome Mr. Scott Robertson, an incredible benefit auctioneer down in Naples, Florida, who just raises countless millions of dollars each year. Thank you so much for joining us, Scott.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And it's especially encouraging to see how many people are lined up or signed up for the webinar because, my goodness, most of the people that we're talking to are donating their time. They're donating their energy because they want to make a difference in the world and they want to help others. And leveraging your time is the best way to do that. And I've been doing professional fundraising auctions for over 23 years, and I can tell you the timeline is an absolute critical component, and it's sometimes the one that's the most overlooked. So I'm so glad that Winspire has invited me on to talk about timelines for the entire event, and today, the live auction.
Absolutely. And again, thank you so much for taking the time, Scott. You have an incredible amount of knowledge that we are excited to impart on our folks out there. My name is Ian Loth. I'm the marketing director here at Winspire. And for those of you who don't know, Winspire, we put together travel packages for live and silent auction fundraisers. Just a quick preview, we've raised in excess of $43 million for nonprofit causes since we've been in business, and supported over 31,000 events globally, and booked over 70,000 satisfied winning bidders. So very proud of those statistics, and we love what we do, creating incredible experiences for you nonprofits out there. But yeah, on to the great information. Oh, before we get ahead of ourselves, Scott, you mentioned a little bit about what you've been up to, but I think some of these stats are really important to share with folks so that they know that you know what you're talking about. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been a fundraising auctioneer for over 23 years, excited about that. And, my laboratory, people say, well, how do you know so much? Well, if you do enough of something, you ought to be good at it, right? At least that's what my father used to tell me. And so I do about 70, Scott Robertson Auctioneers does about 70 events a year. We've done a few more. We're trying to cut back to go for better quality. And in the past 5 years, I'm delighted to say that we've helped organizations just like the people who are listening here today raise over $120 million. That's over a 5-year period of time. So, the fundraising business is good, and the impacts that we're able to have on the lives of others is nothing short of outstanding. So, as mentioned, my laboratory, I have an auction tonight, and I'll learn something tonight that, just like I do every time I do a fundraising auction. So my education comes from the trenches, not something I just read from a book.
I love it. That's great. And if you want to find out more information about Scott and his workshop, you can reach the Voice of Experience, thevo.com. So definitely check it out. Today, here's what we're going to be covering, these 5 secrets. As far as your charity auction timeline goes, we're going to be talking about welcoming your guests, starting the live auction, sequencing your live auction, discussing some auctioneering techniques to make sure that you're selling your items well, and then how to finish with a flourish, how to really round out that event and make sure that it's a great time, because that's what people come to these events for. So I thought it'd be great, as we always do, to start off with a poll, get you guys a little bit involved out there. So the question here today: how many items should be in your live auction? 3 or less? 4 to 7 items, 8 to 12, or 13 or more items. I'm going to put this poll up there. I'm going to launch it. You should see it in front of your screen. Go ahead and submit your answer right now. How many items should be in your live auction? You know, it's a common question that I know we always get, but we want to hear what you guys think out there. Is it 3 or less live auction items, 4 to 7, 8 to 12, or 13 or more auction items? We have about 80% of you have voted. Last few seconds here. All right, I'm going to close the poll and share results. All right, 8 to 12 items in the live auction. I know that is a great average number that I know we recommend here at Winspire as far as for most events, 8 to 12 items in the live auction. Scott, what do you think about those results?
Well, you know, a lot of that depends upon the area of the country that you're in, and most importantly, it depends upon the time that you want to allocate to the live auction, which we're going to talk about later. But I find the events that I'm doing, 8 to 12, which and lots of times it's 10 in itself, and some people are doing 4 to 7. Now, when the 13 plus, I do a lot of wine festival auctions. They typically held in the afternoon, and we may have 40 items in the live auction. But you have to realize that's when the live auction is more part of the entertainment than at your typical sit-down gala that you're going to be having in the evening. And 3 or less, 5%, we see that sometimes. We absolutely see that sometimes. And mostly it's due to time constraints because people don't want it to go for too long.
That's great. And we're going to talk about this very question a little bit more later on in the presentation. But thanks so much for submitting those answers. Great. So to launch things off, in the theme of today's webinar, right? It's all about the charity auction timeline. And this is a great quote that actually comes from Scott. The enemy of any fundraising event is the clock, right? It's all about the timeline. You don't want your events to drag on and make people impatient. You want there to be a very distinct beginning, middle, and end, and you need to be very strategic about how you really time the various elements of your agenda. Now, in terms of the clock today, in this webinar, I wanted to let you guys know that we scheduled it for an hour, but it is very likely that we're going to be going over an hour today. Scott and I just had so much that we wanted to share with you guys. So just note that if you can't stay for the full hour, that's totally fine. We're going to be sending out a video recording after this is over that you can view. But for those who can, definitely stick around. We're going to make sure that we really dive into every single issue. So don't worry if you can't stick around, you should get that recording. Great. So as far as agendas go, right? Scott and I put together this kind of general timeline that we're going to kind of use today as we follow along to each component of the live auction. You can actually download this as a PDF over in the handout section of the little terminal. You'll see where it says handouts 2 of 5. That PDF is something that you can download and follow along if you wish. But we're going to keep revisiting this timeline today as we go through each part of the agenda and really discuss each part. Last week, for those of you who joined us, right, we really talked about the whole silent auction. There's that whole hour and a half after guests arrived. We usually recommend around 6 o'clock. There was that hour and a half of silent auction cocktail hour. That's really, really important. That's a huge part of your event. But we're gonna talk about what happens after that, right? So with that, I'm gonna hand it off to Scott, the man with the knowledge, and you can start telling us, Scott, what do they do after the silent auction? What happens?
Well, and one of the things that we want to, that I certainly encourage all my clients to do is look. I don't say that I do fundraising auctions. I say I do fundraising events. The live auction is a component of the fundraising event, as is the silent auction. But you want to keep your eye on the whole picture. So when we say fundraising event, the live auction is part of it. So let's talk about we're finished with the silent auction. And now it's time to invite them into the dining room. Now, I realize that some events are smaller and everyone's going to be all in the same room. But if you have a larger event, chances are you've had the silent auction in one area, and now we're going to open the doors into the ballroom. I'm a big proponent of keeping the doors closed, keeping the velvet ropes up so that people can't go into the ballroom early, and then all those doors open all at one time, and you have a grand entrance. When the doors open, the music starts to play, people feel feel welcomed, and it attracts the people out of the silent auction area, cocktail reception, into the ballroom. And we want to have a wow factor when they walk in the door. From the beautiful decorations and everything that you've done to make it look great, let's invite them in. And that's a transition. And we want people to transition not only with their physical presence, but with their mental presence, and know that when they walk in, they're walking into an arena where we're going to raise money for tonight's charity.
Well, so what about maybe now, because I know there's a wide range of sizes in terms of events out there, right? There's events that are, 2, 3, even 400 guests, and then there's, the small mom and pop or, local elementary school that may only have 100 guests. What do you recommend as far as, how do you separate the dinner tables for maybe some of those smaller events that don't have a separate ballroom?
I think the smallest event I did last year was 60 people, and the largest one I did was 2,500 people. So that's quite that's quite a range. But if you have a small, and when we say smaller, that doesn't mean smaller in terms of dollar amounts. It means smaller in terms of a number of attendees. So if you're if you're having the event in the school, let's say we're in the cafeteria, you want to separate out the area where people are going to be seated for dinner and where the silent auction area is located. And we don't want those people to come in and sit down. If we're doing an event with 200 people, chances are we're going to have a ballroom situation and be able to invite people to come in. And a sit-down dinner, if at all possible, is preferred. I call it divide and conquer, so that we don't have people going through a buffet line. We have them seated. When a football coach wants to talk to his team, he brings them around and he says, boys, take a knee. So they all kneel down on one knee. Why do they do that? The coach does that so the guys aren't milling around. He also does it so that people can see, and now he has control. Same thing happens if everyone is seated, all of a sudden your MC, your auctioneer, now has better chance at having control over the room. The silent auction, we want people moving around. The live auction, we want them seated.
That's exactly what I was going to want to say, right? And like we talked about last time, right? The silent auction, you want that movement. There should be a very distinct transition, right, to the live auction portion. So let's talk a little bit about that transition that happens, right? How much time should you give them for that transition?
And this is an important component of the timeline that a lot of people make the mistake. They think if they ask everyone to sit down, that 5 minutes will probably make it happen. It doesn't happen, okay? You have to allot at least 15 minutes, and 15 minutes may still not be enough. You're going to probably want to pad a little timing in there, maybe even make it 20 minutes from the time you ask people to sit down till the time that they actually physically sit down. So just be aware of that, because it's the easiest way to throw your timeline off is to not allow enough time for this transition. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have a sense of urgency. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be inviting people to sit down. Doesn't mean you should be doing all the things that you can to get people to transition in. Just be realistic and add in 15, even maybe 20 minutes into the timeline, because that's what it's going to take.
And that's really important too, as far as the agenda goes. And you guys will see that, I use agenda and timeline interchangeably, but the one that you guys downloaded in the handouts there, this is the sort of specificity, right, that you're going to want to have when you are creating your timeline or agenda. Have those transition times put in there, and you want to get down to the minute to make sure that everyone on your staff or who is volunteering knows exactly what should be happening when. And so as you're following along here, this is exactly, if you should not, Scott, you've mentioned to me too, you should have even more specificity in terms of what should be happening even in the background, during these transition periods as well. So
absolutely, this is more of a general outline that we're showing that for the guests to work with, but for your volunteers, a lot more specificity as to what should be going on. When the guests are going in this door, the silent auction items, for one thing, should start to be collected and brought to fulfillment. You're not going to put that on your major timeline, but realize that needs to be timed out and added to your overall general timeline.
That's great. And you mentioned too the cueing the music, right, for this transition. What do you usually recommend for that? I mean, I know there's some events that have bands, some events where it's just somebody's iPhone plugged into the AV cable, but you mentioned using music.
Absolutely. Well, music is going to be an attraction. It's going to put people in the right movement and moment. It's going, the people that come in, they feel like they're coming into a happening. If there's music playing, you don't just have people walking into a quiet room. Although that's what a buzzkill that can be. If you have a band, great. If you don't have a band, that's not a problem either. You can have someone playing an iPod. You can have someone, a disc jockey who's actually there, not the one who does all the talking, the one who simply plays the music. But you can have recorded music to bring people in. But you want people to feel welcome. You want them to have a little spring in their step. They can come in to peppy music. We want to get the people transitioned out of the silent into the live, and music will really help with that transition because, remember, we want to transition their minds as well as their bodies. They need to know we're about to do something special.
That's great. That's great. So great. So we have now cued that transition. People are moving from the silent auction into the live. I love this diagram, and I think this is really important for everyone to pay attention to. This is from Scott, and what he likes to talk about is the triangle of influence and making sure you have reserved tables. Tell us a little bit about that, Scott.
Well, if you're looking, from a perspective of, we all love front row seats. Well, I will tell you, if you look at the triangle influence, and you look at the peak of the triangle, that table happens to be 3 rows back. It's 3 rows back, but yet it's a better seat than the front row over on the edges. It's more of line of sight, and it's where the auctioneer can see easily and where people can be seen. So within that triangle is where you're going to want to put your historic big bidders and big donors. I didn't say anything about sponsors. Historic big bidders and donors need to go in this seats. Just on the outside of those red lines, then you're going to put historic, a little bit smaller donors, but work off that triangle. And the sponsors and people who historically don't bid that much, put them on the outside fringes. They're going to like it better, and you're going to like it better because, success breeds success. And everyone in the room is looking toward the stage, looking toward the auctioneer, and they're going to see those people, and that's going to make the whole event have a much better feel than if they're scattered all over the room. Trust me, it works. It works.
And if you think about it too, these donors who are big donors, they also want to be seen making big bids, right? So they want to be seen front and center making those big bids. It'll likely make them bid more, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I tell you, I hear this one all the time. Is that people say, well, they don't want to be showy. They'll want to bid anonymous. I've been doing this for 23 years. That's on occasion that happens, but for the most part, they may say that. It really doesn't mean it's true, right? And success breeds success, and we want to celebrate their opportunity to bid, and we want to get that emotional feeling in the room. And, wow, Joyce and, Barb and Bob donated. Maybe we should do more than we thought we were going to. And it adds to the fun, competitive atmosphere that makes fundraising auctions successful.
Great. And you mentioned, too, while we were putting these slides together, the difference between reserved seating and reserved tables.
Yes. We definitely, thank you very much for reminding me of that, Ian. We want to have reserved seating, reserved tables in the room. You don't want to have reserved seating. That would mean that you're telling everyone which chair to sit in. What I'm saying is that this is table number 15. It's not written on your screen, but we know who's going to be at that table, and we're going to place them there. If you don't have reserved seating at your event, and I'm going to see some head nodding through the screens here in a minute. The people who are going to take the best seats are the people who are going to spend the least, because they're not really participating in the silent auction. They love to take advantage of the opportunity to get real estate because they want to see the show. Well, they're not going to bid. We don't want those people up front. Give those tables to the high bidders. And next year, if you have someone who is a high bidder and they weren't in that special triangle, move them to the special triangle. It becomes a bit of a pecking order. But we definitely want to reserve the tables where people are going to be. If you have to have open seating, put open seating in the back. It'll also help you to sell tables for another year.
That's great. That's great. Not to mention reserved seats are a whole lot more work than reserved tables, but that's just a side point there. So great, we are now we've given people 15 minutes to transition into the dining room, right? It is now 7:45 and the dinner service begins. The dinner service is very important. Obviously, this component needs to be well timed. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you usually recommend with meeting and planning with the food service that you're working with?
Well, we've talked all about timeline. An important component of the timeline is food service. And realize that food service is going to be working off your timeline. Okay? If they're supposed to serve entrees at 7:43, those entrees are going to be ready at 7:43, whether the room is ready for them or not. So you have to stay on your timeline. You also have to, when we talk about service, when we talk about clearing, when we talk about all those sort of things, the chef, the person, or the dining room manager, the person who's controlling that ballroom, they know how long it takes based upon experience. Make sure they're on board with what you're doing, and also communicate with them throughout the night. I would recommend having one person who's the go-between between the dining room manager and the event, so that the person who's in charge of the overall event isn't running around doing that, and they're able to send messages saying, it looks like we're 3 minutes behind, Chef. How's that look for you? We can handle it. Because there has to be a lot of communication, and the chef the food service has to be on board if we're going to stay on our timeline.
I love it. That's great. Yep. Make sure
and that needs to
very
yep. Right, and that meeting needs to happen 2 weeks before the event, not the night of the event.
Right. Absolutely. This is one recommendation that I thought was really interesting from you. This idea of preset salads. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I know I'm going to get some pushback on this because I always do, and people who are concerned about the dining room presence, and they're worried about the meal, and they're worried about all those sort of things, say, oh, we can never have a preset salad. It just doesn't look right. It works like a charm. You just go ahead. Because remember, we're not making money from the dinner. We're making money from the auction. If you can have the salads preset when people walk in the room, and they've only been sitting there for 5 minutes or less, if they can serve those much faster, we're going to save at least 10 minutes on our timeline. And remember, time is money. We're going to save at least 10 minutes so that they don't have to put the salads on the table. Also, it can be an attraction. If people have been drinking for an hour and a half, as they are in our timeline that we're discussing here, they're going to see food. Maybe they're really hungry. And it'll give them an incentive to sit down and to go ahead and start eating.
That's great. I think you said something really important here that I think you should repeat. You don't make money from what? You make money from, I think you should repeat that.
You don't make money from the dinner. You don't make money from the table decorations. You make the money during the auction.
Right.
Focus on the fundraising.
There you go, right? Getting people in their seats and engaged is going to give you more, every minute counts, right? During the live auction, in terms of squeezing more money out of the audience. I know that you know this better, and we're going to talk about that here. So I think that's a really important sentiment that people should pay attention to. So now people have sat down, right? Whether you have preset salads or not, people are in their seats, and it's time to begin the show, right? Starting the live auction, and usually that begins with some speakers, right? Tell us a little bit about that, Scott.
Oh. Remember, we just talked about being able to save 10 minutes, and I'm sure some folks outside are saying, no, we can't do that. Just remember this, at 3.5 minutes per item, if you save 10 minutes there, you could sell 3 more items, right? So, I mean, that tells you that, that 10 minutes is absolutely money. The other person that can also take up a lot of time are speakers. We don't want people to stand up and take a lot of time and take people's attention and tell us all about the history of the organization. We don't want them standing up and thanking all the sponsors because remember, they're stealing time from your fundraising moments. And we're going to talk about the golden hour here in a little bit. Speakers, they need to be scripted, they need to be introduced, they need to be sound checked, and they need to provide, write this one down, everybody, brief, inspiring remarks. Don't tell me all about the history. Don't tell me about why you're involved. Don't tell me about all the things. Brief, inspiring remarks, and move on. Move on. Don't let someone just get the microphone. And if someone says, I'm going to get up there and wing it, never let them have the microphone. They're not allowed to wing it. They have to be scripted, they have to be practiced, and they have to stay on the topic. And they have to stay on their script, and it has to be timed. A speaker, 90 seconds, about maximum. They can say what they need to say in 90 seconds per speaker, yes. That doesn't mean you need 5 speakers either.
Right. That's great. Cool. So the speakers have started, right? They're giving that brief welcome, opening announcements, maybe 10 minutes for that. And now we're going to start serving those entrees, right? Clearing those dinner plates around 7:55. Give about 10 minutes for that. And that's when you start serving entrees. And I love this recommendation from you about making sure the money first, right? So tell us a little bit about how you recommend to serve the entrees.
Well, Ian, can you go back one slide, because I want to make an important point here, I think, and that is about serving. Their people are eating their salad. They're in good position. They're getting food. They're ingesting food. Everything is good. You have someone stand up, do a brief welcome and opening announcements, and then they sit down. Then the salad plates are cleared and the entrees come out. Notice that's separate from starting the live auction. We get that out of the way. We get it out of the way early. And we get it out of the way when people are eating their salads. Now we move forward and begin serving our entrees. Now remember that triangle of influence. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. The triangle of influence. We want to serve the money first. And what that means is we're going to serve it inside out. We're going to start serving the people in that front row within that triangle and work our way out. If you leave it to food service, they're going to do it the easiest way possible for them. It's probably going to start on the outside edges and work their way in. We don't want that. We want to serve the money first so that the tables that are on the furthest outside corners, they're going to get their food last. Okay? By the time we're finished serving the money and it works out and it radiates out from there, the people who were served first are going to be pretty much finished dinner. Great. They're not going to have any problems at all. The people on the outside who probably aren't going to be your primary bidders anyway, well, they've got something to do now. They can eat dinner.
Love it.
Because as I always say, I've never started a live auction too early, but I've sure finished them too late. Remember, we're racing the clock right now without rushing.
That's so important. That's so good. So yeah, serving that money first, doing it inside out. And so now we've spent about 15 minutes, right? This is all dependent on the size of your audience. This assumes about 200 guests in a ballroom. It takes about 15 minutes to serve everyone. And it's at now 8:20, and they've finished serving entrees. So they've finished serving entrees in the outer edges of that diagram there. And by that time, that's given the triangle of influence to finish their meals. And then this is another rule of yours that you've harped on a lot. Make sure you give that 2 minutes after the last entree is served. Tell us why you recommend that.
Right. Well, while it's great to put down timelines and study it on paper, it's one thing. Reality is another. If it took an extra 2 minutes to get everyone seated, remember back in that 15 minutes, well, let's say it took 17 minutes. Now we're 2 minutes behind time. Or let's make it 18. So we're 3 minutes behind time, so I'm not confusing anyone about the 2 minutes. I wait till the last entree has touched the tables, start the clock, the 120 seconds, so that they can dive into that entree without feeling like, wow, they're starting without me. Once they've had 2 minutes starting with their entree, it's time to start. It's time to start the live auction. Because remember, again, we don't want movement in the room. If people get finished eating, they might stand up and go over and visit another table. They might come over here. All of a sudden, we've got movement in the room, and we've lost control. If we start the live auction while everybody is seated and eating or finishing up, we now have control. And the only people that are going to get up are those people who really have to go to the restroom or something. It's not going to be people who got up just to go out and be social. So 2 minutes after the last entree touches the table, begin.
That's great. So this 8:22, that time can move around. Like you said, it depends on how long maybe it takes to serve the entrees, but But the key indicator for you, like you just said, right, is as soon as that last entree hits the table, wait 120 seconds. And I love your visual. You always start your stopwatch, right, Scott? Right, in the auditorium, and you don't start a moment sooner. That's great. So we are now. It's time to start.
And this is usually, and if you go back to slide, I'm sorry. This is usually a great time for someone to stand up and give a brief, inspiring remark about why we're here and how the money they're about to give will impact the lives of others. And once they finish that, they need to end it on a high note. And now our auctioneer for the evening, Scott Robertson.
Energy goes up.
Right. The energy level automatically goes up. I come out, bing, 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 get the crowd a little fired up. Takes about a minute to do that, and now we're right into the live auction. Here we go. Do you feel the energy? That's what you want. Don't start with a whimper. Start with a bang.
Do you usually start with music? Do you have a certain song that you come out to, or what do you recommend there?
Well,
Rocky, like Eye of the Tiger, or what?
Rocky's a pretty good one when you think about it. But it puts people in the right frame of mind. I come out to a lot of different music, and I use music throughout the auction, but that's me. Not every auctioneer wants to do that. But Let's Get It Started works. Happy. Tonight's going to be a great night. Black Eyed Peas. There's a lot of good songs. Mm-hmm. But again, remember, it's another transition. It's another transition so that people know, hey, it's about to happen right now. We better get ready. In fact, there's a song right there. I think that was from the late '70s or early '70s. Get Ready. Mm-hmm. It's another great intro song.
Yeah, I might be a little young for that one, but being a millennial and all, no.
You're a bragger.
Just kidding. I think I know the song you're talking about, though. Yeah, great transition song.
I'll send it to you on a 45.
There you go. I love it. All right, great. So now we've started. You've coming out on the stage, and the thing starts. So you have a great story about the curveball story, but making sure you start no matter what.
Well, absolutely. You want to stay on your timeline, and you want to know if you're off your timeline, right? I mean, your timeline should be right there, and there should be people almost with stopwatches. So if you're 3 minutes off your timeline, you know you're 3 minutes off your timeline, and you're trying to make it up. What a lot of folks do is they postpone this. The next thing you know, I recently did an auction where they were 25 minutes behind on their timeline. 25 minutes. Their 15 minutes got stretched out just a little bit to 40 minutes. Well, all that's well and good, except they forgot to tell the dining room manager, who didn't tell the chef. So the food is coming. In this particular auction, their plan was to only do a few items and to do it before dinner. Okay? Well, that's great, except they were 25 minutes behind. And the live auction is going on, and here come the entrees. Not a great thing. So this particular lady was bidding on a $25,000 diamond necklace. And all at once, she is presented with this huge piece of beef rib or something. Anyway, so there she is. She's looking at me. The waiter's right there plopping down this big plate of food in front of her. And she was just kind of overcome, and she just didn't bid anymore. She would have bid more, but they had food service going on during the live auction. And it's all because they got off their timeline. If you're off your timeline, make sure you alert the kitchen and do your best to make up the time. It really hurt. I bet it hurt this particular live auction. I bet they missed $100,000. And that's real money.
Wow.
And it's all because they got off their timeline.
Wow. So yeah, how about that?
It's painful to watch.
Right, I'm sure it is.
And
especially when you know the opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, and not to throw out big numbers, like that, but it doesn't matter if it's 100,000 or if it's 10,000. It's really about the percentages, or $1,000. It depends upon the percentages for the group that you're working with. It could be $1 million. It could be $10. Whatever it is, you stay on your timelines. You make smooth transitions. You're going to raise more money and have a better event. Guaranteed.
Love it. So that's great. And, a big part of that too is, and you talk about riding that energy wave, right? Making sure that you're on time, the transitions are happening, things are happening when they should, the energy is up exactly like you had it planned, and now you enter what you like to call the golden hour, which I think is great. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the golden hour is not necessarily a time on a clock, but a time in everyone's head, if you will, in their brain. When do they have the most emotion? When are they going to be the most emotional? When are they going to have the most energy? When are they going to be feeling the best about the charity? And that's when you want to have your fundraising going on. Earlier is always better because people have more energy. It's absolute critical. People tend to wait to the last minute, and then we've missed that opportunity. Now, for all those people who are sitting out there right now saying, well, I don't know about this speaker stuff, because it's important that these speakers stand up and tell us all kinds of great information about the charity, and the board of director, the chair, always wants to talk for about 10 minutes. Realize that 10 minutes, he's eating into your golden hour. Don't let that happen. If he wants to speak so much, put him at the end of the program. If it's that important, people will stay and wait. Don't let them eat into your golden hour, because your golden hour is when you're going to raise the most money. Take full advantage of it. The other thing that you want to do, no interruptions during the live auction. Oh, well, we thought we would. Here's what I have clients say on occasion. We want to mix it up a little bit. We're going to sell 3 items, and then we're going to draw a raffle item. In other words, you're going to interrupt the live auction, and any momentum that the auctioneer was able to build up, you're going to take that all the way away. Yeah, then we're going to go a little further, and we're going to do a special surprise for Marjorie, because Marjorie's been this volunteer that has done so much, and we're going to honor her then. You just interrupted the live auction again. And then you can sell those final 4 items. And then if people are still wanting to give, they can give at the special appeal. Well, we're going to talk about the special appeal in our next segment. But, folks, don't interrupt the live auction. The auctioneer we're up there, and he's working, he or she. There's a lot of great female auctioneers out there. And I do mean a lot, especially in the fundraising business. But let them build the momentum in the room, and you don't always know when the momentum opportunities are going to be there, but don't interrupt the live auction. Get that momentum going, get people feeling good about the charity, and let's have those people overpay for items so that we can help our charity do better work.
And if you think about the golden hour too, I mean, it's now 8:30, right? As kind of when we're thinking this starts, they've now been drinking for 2 hours, right? And you think about that alcohol bell curve that we talked about last time. I apologize, I didn't put it into this presentation, but you have that alcohol bell curve where people get, in the beginning, people are riding that, buzz, it gets great, and then if you wait too long, people start to get really tired, right? You want to hit the peak of that bell curve, and if you're doing the timing right and you're not wasting any time, people are peaking, right? They've had those 2 cocktails at least, and it's going to happen right here during that golden hour.
All right, and let's also think about physiology. I mean, we've got people digesting food right now because they've suddenly eaten, and their body's going, hey, wait a minute here. I've got to send energy down to the stomach and help. There's a lot of things that go into it. All you need to know is don't waste your time. Don't waste the time, and don't waste that golden hour.
There you go. All right, let's get into a little bit of meat and potatoes here of the live auction sequencing. I know we always get a lot of questions about this. We asked it in the very beginning. How many live auction items should you include in your event depending on the size? What do you usually recommend? Let's go to those extremes, right? Where you've been doing an event that's 60 people versus 500 people. What is the determining factor in terms of how many items you should have?
Well, there's several factors that goes into it. The number one factor is time. How much time do you want the live auction to occupy within the rest of the evening? And do the math, divide that amount of time that you want to give to the live auction, divide it by 3.5 for 3.5 minutes, and that'll tell you how many items you should have. and then add in 10 minutes for a special appeal later on. That's my litmus test. I used to say 3 minutes, but I find that 3 minutes feels like it's rushing just a little bit. And again, it's okay to be less than your time. You just don't want to go over your time. Another thing that I often say are that auctions are like snowflakes. No two are alike. So what works in Naples, Florida may not be the best idea for Des Moines, Iowa. Okay, the people in Des Moines,
Right.
they may really enjoy auctions, and the auction's part of the entertainment, so they could have more items. The other thing that we want to think about is what is your financial goals, and what is the capacity of the people in the room? If the capacity, and I'm just going to throw out numbers, don't hold me to anything, but if your goal is $21,000 in the live auction, and the capacity of the people in the room is that you're probably not going to sell any items for over $3,000, well, we know we have to have 7 items in order to reach that $21,000 goal. If people are going to be spending $300 on the item, you can do the math that way. Or if they're going to, if they're going to spend $30,000 on an item, wouldn't that be awesome? We do it the other way. But you have to think about the capacity of the people in the room, and also with your fundraising goal, all wrapped into how much time you wish to take, and that'll give you a better idea of how many items you want. Generally speaking, and as our audience said, 7 to 12.
I like that. Yep, 7 to 12 is great number. That's what we recommend as well. And you also talk about the 80-20 rule, right? You don't want to bore. Typically the live auction involves that kind of 20% of guests. Not most of the guests are not involved in the live auction. 80% of them are typically watchers, right? They're spectators. So you don't want to have it drag on and bore the rest of your audience if it goes too long.
Well, and that's exactly right. And remember, every event, every fundraising event is also about audience development. And you never know who may be coming in. They may not buy something this year, but you may be setting them up to buy things, in previous years. And a story from my childhood, my aunt and uncle used to invite us over, and they had some very well-to-do family members. And they would come in and they would have Christmas, and we'd all be there for Christmas time. Well, they're passing out the Rolex watches and the mink stoles. This is back in the 70s, and we're a bunch of little country kids from Kentucky where we're hoping to get a Jack in the Box or something. So
Right.
It's not that much fun to sit on the outside watching these really high end items go out there. So you have to think about the whole audience. But again, remember, we're there it's a fundraiser. You don't have to have something for everyone. We have to raise as much money as we can.
That's important to remember. So now we know how many items we have, right? We've got 7 to 12, depending on how much time and the size of our audience, the how much we're trying to raise. Another question we always get is what order do you put them in? And I know that is an idea that gets glazed over a lot. People don't really think about it too much, but as you've communicated to me, it is actually very crucial.
Well, it is, and I will tell you this: if you've hired a professional fundraising auctioneer, which I hope you have, because if we don't pay for ourselves, we don't deserve the job. But get your professional fundraising auctioneer to come in and help you, or put these auction items in order for you, because they'll understand the flow of the room. They'll understand how it'll ebb and flow, and they're thinking about how they're going to sell and how one item sets up another. And if we have 2 items that are identical to each other, obviously we want to spread those apart. So we've got an example that we came up with 8 items. So let's look at these and see how.
It?
Sure.
Yeah, this is great. Let me introduce this a little bit. So Scott, actually, this was Scott's idea, and I thought it was fantastic. What he was brought to the table was just 8 auction items, and I'll list them here. These are 8 items that you'll typically see in an auction fundraiser. Various travel items and local chef items. Why don't you tell us a little bit about these items and why you have those values on them, and why you selected these 8.
Okay, and while we're doing that, I want everyone at home to be thinking about which item, what is your order that you think they should go in. The first item, 12-person, you're going to get a chef's table at a local restaurant. This happens to be a restaurant in Naples, Florida, because I'm from Naples, and I thought I would bring that in. But, people, something exclusive like that, which is awesome. Dinner with Chef Brian Rowland, who's a great chef. He does a lot of in-home catering. It typically brings, $4,000 or more. Everybody loves Chef Brian Rowland. He does a great thing. Our next package is a Windspire package, and of course they do a great job. That's why part of the reason I'm here. Sonoma Valley Winemaker. If you have people that are into wine, a blending seminar, wine tours and tasting, you get to stay at Fairmont Sonoma. I mean, that has great appeal. And then a staycation. Staycations typically work where, in your area, because airfare is not needed, people tend to love staycations, especially schools, because, they don't have to worry about their kids and they flying and all the things that are associated with it. Havana, Cuba. My goodness, what a hot package. I just got back from Cuba, and I can tell you everybody needs to go to Cuba. It's absolutely wonderful. It's fun. The food's great. And it's an eye-opener to go see Cuba, which is just 90 miles off the coast. Then we've got a special yacht cruise on a 102-foot yacht. Everybody's going to want to do this. This is really special. It needs to be date-specific, and it is here. Then we've got a $400 gift certificate to Denny's, and then we've got the ultimate Broadway experience with a chance to go to Hamilton. Hamilton is the hottest show on Broadway, and it has been for a while. There's only two kinds of people in the world, those that have seen Hamilton and those who want to go see Hamilton, and maybe those who want to go again. I don't think there's any limit to how many times you can see this. Well, everyone, here's my question to you. All these things are really great except for one. One of these things is not like the other. So I'm going to take that $400 gift certificate to Denny's, and I'm going to put it in the silent auction. All it's going to do is bring down your live auction. That's all it's going to do. And lots of people have this idea that we should start the live auction off with a lower-end item so that we can really get their attention, and they call it a warm-up item. I gave up on warm-up items 10 years ago. I think it is the wrong thing to do. Start with a bang. Set the tone for the live auction. Don't sell a $400 gift certificate to Denny's. You're telling people that everything else is going to go for $400 too. And you can see the prices that we're hoping to get for the other items. It doesn't fit. Pull it out of the live, put it in the silent, and let's get going from there. Now let's talk about building the live auction list. So what I do is I pick the item that I think is going to be the most popular, that's going to be the best item, and I'm going to put it in the cleanup position, which means just past halfway. So I'm going to put that one in first. And as I look these over, the one that I see, Hamilton. And if we could, let's go ahead and move Hamilton over there. So I'm doing this on a table, right? And I've cut all these little slides out so I can slide them around. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to figure out which one I want to go first and which one I want to go last. You're like, Scott, can't you count? Trust me, this is the way I do it, and it works. The first one I want to start off with is going to be one that has wide appeal, something that everyone in the room would love to own. They may not be willing to pay for it, but they'd love to own it. Therefore, we've captured everyone's attention. And that first item for me, Chef Brian Rowland. Everybody loves Chef Brian Rowland, so let's put him in the first position. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to figure out which item do I want to go last. Now, we don't want just a dud at the bottom, but we want something that can kind of catch the people that are there. And if you're going to have a sacrificial lamb, put it last. And also, if you're going to have something that's really going to create a lot of commotion in the room, like you have the celebrity firefighters, they're going to come out and make a show. You'd want to put them last, too. So what I want to do is I'm going to put the 7-night staycation last, which is going to keep everybody's attention. There we go, 7-night staycation. Now I'm looking at everything else. I want to make sure that I separate the dinners from other dinners. I want to make sure that if I have something that is similar, if I had 2 trips to wine country, I'd want to make sure that I separated them out. And if I did that, I'd want to put the best item first. So as I'm looking at this, Chef Brian Rowland, that's food inspired. Havana's food inspired. I'm going to move Havana, Cuba up to the number 2 spot. So let's go ahead. Okay, so Havana, Cuba's up there. And now I'm looking at what's left. I've got a 12-person dinner at Sea Salt. I've got the yacht cruise for 12 people. I believe I believe the yacht cruise is going to be more popular, even though it's not as valued as high. I believe it's going to be more popular than the sea salt. So I'm going to go ahead and move the yacht cruise to the number 3 position. And I'm going to move the chef's table down. Let's see. Sorry about that. So we got the yacht. I'm going to move Sonoma below Hamilton. And everybody loves wine country. And then I'm going to move in the chef's table into the 6th spot. And here's part of my reasoning for this. The people that are going, you're going to have a group of bidders get together to bid on the yacht cruise because I think it's going to be more popular. They get together. There's going to be a winner, and there's going to be the other people who didn't win. But they still have a group of 12 people who have all said, hey, we'll spend real money to go on that cruise. Well, we've now given them 2 more items. They can say, hey, look, we were already all committed to spend money on the 12. We had 6 couples committed to go on the cruise. Let's just spend that money and go to the chef's table at Sea Salt. What do you say? So they'll agree. You can't have it directly below because they won't have time to get their bidding people together. And remember, when you have, there's usually one person in charge of those 12-person type of deals, or when you have groups of people getting together, that's the person I need to know who it is because that's the person, as the auctioneer, I'm going to focus on. So that's my suggested order. But again, work with your fundraising auctioneer, and they'll probably be able to help you do the same thing.
That's a great example, Scott, and I love how you do that. And hearing how your thought process and how you think through each and every item and how it is very strategic. I think a couple really important points for people to remember here is make sure you separate like items. That includes international versus domestic experiences, food, dining, those sorts of things. Make sure it's you keep it mixed up. But you'll notice there's a really nice flow to this now, and it really peaks at that ultimate Hamilton Broadway. You talk about that golden hour and getting people to peak in the momentum. That's why you want to put that one you think is going to go for the most right there, just after the middle point of your live auction. So great. Thank you so much for that, Scott.
Sure.
We're coming up on an hour here. So for those of you who can't stick around for the full hour, I just want to remind you we are going to be sending out a recording of this. But I highly recommend that you all stick around. We just have a few more slides left, and we're going to go into the Q&A. So time is of the essence here, right? The clock
Always
matters
is.
for webinars too. So we're just going to keep trudging along here. So, and you mentioned there was a couple Winspire experiences in that example of yours, and I thought it'd be good to take a second to talk about consignment travel items. And how would you strategize? Because for those of you who don't know out there, right, consignment travel is just a great tool. Obviously, Scott uses it, but it's a great way to round out your live auction offering. Obviously, it's not all consignment items in there; it's supplemented with others. But it's a really good way, especially if you can't procure travel elsewhere, to include it within that live auction offering. And in that whole flow that you just mentioned, can you tell us a little bit about how you would try to sell those consignment items multiple times?
Absolutely. Well, one nice, consignment items. People say, oh, my goodness, I don't want to have to pay for items. The beauty of one thing is absolutely for sure, and it's a trend, is that procuring great auction items, it gets more challenging every year. You can have the horsepower in the room. By that, I mean you have people with good capacity in the room, but they don't have but we can't get them the items that they really want to bid on. Therefore, we're leaving money on the table. Consignment, Winspire, they're able to go out and collect all these great items at a wholesale cost, and then sell them and then give them to the charities on a consignment basis, which means you don't pay for it until the item is sold. And then we sell the items during the live auction. Well, what's really great is if you get 2 or more people really hot and heavy bidding on a live auction item, instead of just saying sold and only selling it once, you're able to say sold and sell it more than 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. And so therefore you're able to make a lot more profit for the organization, because Winspire can fulfill those orders for you. Love consignment because, generally speaking, they get items that no one else is able, and put together trips that no one else is able to do. And Winspire does a great job of this.
And again, yeah, we're not the only ones out there. If you guys are going to go out there, make sure you do your due diligence and know what you're going to get. One thing that we definitely pride ourselves on is a full service booking service. So we take care of your winning bidders after the event is over. We don't just send them certificates. But with consignment travel, that's so handy is that you get open-ended travel. So their winners can go whenever they want, as opposed to donated travel or things like that. That cruise, right? There's a very specific date. So open-ended travel is a very key component of this. But you can create group experiences out of any package, right? You can have, if you mentioned 6 couples all wanting to go on that 12-person cruise. Well, the same thing can happen if you just string together 3 or 4, 2-person packages and have 12 couples all go to Napa Valley, for example. So we've seen entire tables purchase a Winspire package, so that it ends up going 5 or 6 times, and that amplifies the amount you make on those items. So that's really important as well.
Absolutely, and I'd like to piggyback on what you mentioned, and that's the concierge. If the person who's giving you the consignment items, it's paramount for the charity that they provide concierge service, so that your phone doesn't ring. They're calling Winspire. Winspire has lovely people that answer the phone. They're in this business. They're travel agents, if you will, and they're able to help the people put things together. And Winspire, with me, has a 100% customer satisfaction track record. I mean, absolute. But you want that. Make sure who you're consigning the items from does the concierge service, so your phone isn't ringing saying, hey, I want to go on the trip on April the 19th, and you go, well, how do we do that? We want to say sold, you collect the money, and turn it over to Winspire.
You want to wipe your hands clean when you're done with the event. You don't want to do any sort of post-event fulfillment, right? You want to just move on and start planning your next event. So thank you for that, Scott. I really appreciate it. Tell us a little bit more about some other auctioneering techniques. I know a couple other really important points here. You use Ringman and bid spotters in your audience, no?
Absolutely, I do. And professional ringmen, you can call them ringmen, auction assistants, bid spotters, whatever you want. They're the eyes and the ears of the auctioneer. Yep. Oh, in fact, I basically only use women because they're great. They're great, and my girls are great, and they do a super. I say girls, they're all 40-something with a college degree, but they're great people. And one professional spotter is way better than 6 volunteers. Oh, we've got volunteers that do this. No, you've probably got volunteers that stand in the way. You want to have a few great ringmen out there to be the eyes and the ears, and especially when you're doubling packages or tripling packages. I don't do that from the stage. My spotters that are out working the room, they're the ones that asked about doubling, and then they signal back to me, and bang, away we go. Just the other night, not to tell another war story, but here goes. Was selling a James Beard dinner that was provided by Winspire. The bidding had kind of settled out at $20,000, and I just sensed there was more money in the room, and one of my ringmen went over to the person, talked to them, and the next thing you know, it goes back up again. We get it to $40,000 from $20,000. We now have 3 different bidders that are bidding. We get it up to $40,000. Now the bidding has stalled, and I realize that it's over, and one of my ringmen went to one person, one went to another, and we were able to sell the dinner 3 times. Bang, bang, bang. Wow. So in other words, there was $120 worth of income, less consignment cost versus $20,000 worth of income. I mean, that's significant. That's a $100,000 swing, and it's all because of the bid spotters. Do they pay for themselves? Absolutely.
Right, and some auctioneers will have them, some won't. What would you recommend to nonprofits out there who maybe are working with an auctioneer who doesn't provide them, or haven't never used a bid spotter before?
Yeah. Well, then the auctioneer should provide training for the spotters. They should come in, if the doors are going to open at 6 o'clock, they should have a training at 5:30 and go over what they want them to do and how they should be bid spotters for them, so that everybody has a confidence level and a comfort level with each other.
I like it. Great. This is one of my favorite parts here, the importance of pictures. And Scott and I thought it'd be good to throw up this image of Adam Levine, I think his name is, because pictures speak 1,000 words, right? I could just talk about Adam Levine from Maroon 5, and you guys, maybe some of you would be like, oh, I love Adam Levine, but then you see this picture of Adam here, and how could you not love ad Levine, right? So pictures are very important when you are selling an auction package during a live auction. When that auctioneer is up there speaking on a package, trying to paint that picture with words, you're gonna go miles further if you have actual pictures going along in a presentation. Did you want to mention anything here, Scott, before I show an example?
Well, just that you're absolutely, and people hear so much better when they see what goes along with it. The theater of the mind works great for radio, and I guess it works great for webinars, but pictures. Yes, take the time, build the PowerPoint slides. It doesn't take that long, and boy, does it have an impact. Let's see some of your examples, Ian.
Well, and you just mentioned a great example. The fact we're actually not, webinars are a great example. You guys would have a tough time probably listening to us drone on here for over an hour, but the fact that you're able to follow along with pictures and slides really adds to the engagement and helps us communicate what we're trying to communicate to you, our audience out there. So let's look at a couple examples, all right? Here's one of our best-selling packages, Napa Valley Backroads and Railways. Wine train chauffeur. Here's what you get if you were to just put out the package with no pictures, right? Well, with every single one of our packages, we also have a PDF that can be blown up to poster size, right? Look at that. That is going to communicate much better what you're going to get with this package. It has different icons, different pictures, everything. There's a lot of design effort that went into this to make sure that it communicates and gets people, that perceived value of this package dramatically increases. And not just posters and PDFs, but probably one of the most effective things you can use, and what I'm using right now for this webinar actually is PowerPoint, right? And so I put together a slide here of this same package on PowerPoint, and you can actually download, I put this, and we'll just show you here. I just hit this key once, and this is going to go on its own. These transitions are happening on their own, right, with certain delays where there's new pictures that are going to start fading in, right, from this package. These are all images that you get with the package when you reserve it. But putting these into a PowerPoint as the auctioneer is talking, they're talking all about the Meritage Hotel and this incredible pool and the vineyards, right? As they're talking about it, it's gonna really, really get people very invested in that package. So this slide that you just saw, you can actually download as a template over on the right where you downloaded the timeline, and that has all the transition animations in it. But what's really important when you're building these slides is to be able to hit the key once on a single package and have the transition and new pictures coming up all on their own while the auctioneer is talking. You can have that going for a full 3 minutes, right? As Scott said that each item should be about 3.5 minutes. We'll make sure there's new pictures coming in every few seconds so that it really helps communicate the value of that package. Do you want to say anything else there, Scott?
Well, one thing is right, and what you said is all great because you don't want to have somebody having to keep pecking the keyboard because they'll forget where they were supposed to be. But one thing you don't want to do is don't add sound. Keep the sound out. And I'm not a big person who really loves to fade things in slowly. It looks great when you're just watching the PowerPoint, but when you're at the live auction, you want people paying attention to the screen and to the auctioneer, not watching the show. So get it up there, pull it out there. I like bullet points on slides, but what you're trying to do is you're wanting people to visualize themselves there. If you've ever been to Napa Valley, if you've ever been to wine country, you're seeing those grapes. That's your favorite. That's your happy place to be. Honey, we need to bid on this.
Right.
and that's it.
I love it.
We don't want them comparison shopping. We don't want to do everything. Notice they've got a younger couple and an older couple. We want people to be able to visualize themselves there, enjoying the experience. We're not talking about how much they paid for it. A question that often comes up is, should we put the retail value on the slides? I say no. Don't put the retail value on the slides because I believe you just put a cap on the bidding. So I would not do that because we want to sell things for more than retail ideally. And if you tell people how much someone's supposed to spend, they're a little embarrassed if they overspend it. Let them perceive the value and bid from there.
Love it. That's definitely what we recommend as well, whether it's the auction catalog or the slides. Refrain from putting any sort of suggested retail value because it definitely puts that ceiling in their mind. That's great. All right, we are closing up here. You guys have been very patient with us. The final part, final secret here of the charity auction timeline, finishing with a flourish. And I know this is something that you do really well, Scott. I've seen videos of it, and tell us a little bit about why it's important to finish with a flourish.
Oh my goodness, this is absolutely one of my hot buttons. Is we don't want to sell the last item and there's no plan, and you say, all right, and we sold the last item, sold. Now what do? We just confused everyone. Sold. And now, well, what do? The lights come on. People start talking to each other. Is it over? Is that the last one? No, finish with a flourish. Celebrate what you were just able to do. Use that music component to come in. Remember, this is another transition time. We finished the live auction. We did it with a sense of urgency. Now, boom, let's celebrate our way out of this and let everybody feel good about it. Don't let it end with a thud. We started the live auction with a bang. We're going to end it with a bang as well. And realize the live auction is merely one component of the entire event. So we want, now we're just no longer asking people for money, right? We want them to get on. We want it, whether we're going to have dancing afterwards, whatever we do, we want to have music. We want to fill in that void. We want thank yous to come out. But the main thing is have a plan. Have a plan. And by the way, I mentioned thank yous. This is a great time to thank everyone, because you're not thanking the people who helped make the event possible. You're thanking the donors for their generosity. And you can do that under an underbed of music too, so it adds more excitement. It adds more feeling of love, because I'm a big believer that when people decide if they want to attend a fundraising event for the next year, it's at the end of this year. Make them feel good, so when they're driving away, they're like, honey, that was a lot of fun. We need to come back and do this again next year. And they go ahead and put it on their calendar. Remember, you're always selling at a fundraising event. Just this time, we're not asking for money. We're asking for their participation. People came there for a reason. They want to help. Help them celebrate. Help them feel good about what they did.
That's great. And you mentioned, too, when we were putting this together, something about a soft opening for checkout, maybe a little bit before the live auction is coming to a close. What do you mean by that? What's a soft opening?
Right. Well, we don't want to open up the checkout early, because some people will just get up and leave, and we don't want the movement in the room. Well, and some people will argue back, well, they weren't going to buy anything anyway. It doesn't matter. They're filling up space within the room. Hopefully they're cheering the other winners, and we're moving forward from that. So don't give them that opportunity to check out early. Now, that being said, there's going to be some insistent people. So I would open up checkout 10 minutes early, but I sure wouldn't post that anywhere. And then if there's people who are so insistent that they want to get out early, well, check them out. But check them out 10 minutes early, not before, and that way the initial rush is out. Another reason to finish with the flourish, and hopefully with if you have a band or if you have music or whatever, we want to slow the migration down to checkout. That way there's not a line, there's not a queue of people waiting. The longer we can keep people in the ballroom, the shorter that queue is going to be. The three keys, if you can answer this question to any fundraising event, and I'm going to tell you it was successful, and those three keys are, get your pens out. Did it start on time, and did you stay on your timeline? Did everyone have fun? Was checkout easy? If you say yes to those three things, and we'll talk more about that next time, but if you say yes to those three things, you had a successful event. So anything you can do to slow the queue to checkout, the better. And if you're giving them an entertainment type of thing, even better. If you have a band and you're planning on people dancing, that band cannot start 3 minutes after the live auction ended. It needs to start when the live auction ends or when the thank yous are complete. You cue up the band, bang, and away they go. Because remember, we're trying to keep people in the room. We're trying to help people have fun. If you have 3 minutes of silence as the band gets on stage and tunes up and all that sort of thing, you lost your audience. They're gone. They've been drinking since 6 o'clock. They've had a big meal. You've extracted money out of their wallets. They're disinterested. The band can be the greatest band ever. They need to start on time. If you use an iPod, if you have a DJ, that DJ needs to be queued up, ready to go. So when we say thank you and good night, bang. Oh, I don't say goodnight. I say, and here's the music, and away you go.
Well,
Remember,
now,
it's a transition, a very important transition.
now, Scott, I know you do something a little bit special when you don't just say, here we go. I know you do a little something extra. Don't you do a little leg kick or something?
Yeah, and I usually do a little 1, 2, 3, 4, bam. All right, and so I've coordinated that with the band ahead of time, so it transitions just boom right over.
I love it.
So it's the smooth transition from the auctioneer, who should be entertaining, not the entertainment, to the band. I exit stage right and go thank the generous bidders that night, and the focus is now all on the band. It's that transition time that we want to keep all wrapped up, all smooth, and people sometimes don't realize why they're having fun. They just know they are having fun. That's what production value's all about.
Great. Fantastic. All right. Well, cool. Well, that is just great. And speaking of finishing with a flourish, just for those of you out there who want more information just like this from the man himself, Scott Robertson has an incredible number of tips and things that he provides on his website. So definitely check out thevo.com. He has a great ebook all about fundraising auctions. And you can receive periodic articles to your inbox as well. For those of you who don't know, we also always come out with news and resources, free things, tools, templates at Winspire News. You can subscribe to Winspire News today and enter our donation giveaway. We actually just announced our donation giveaway winner today for Q4, and you can win a $1,200 travel package if you enter here. Our next drawing is on April 1st, 2017. So I highly recommend subscribing and entering that giveaway, and you'll get great resources delivered to your inbox. I just want to thank Scott again so much for coming and sharing your knowledge with us today. You can see his email address here. You can reach out directly to him with any questions that you have. We're going to get to the questions here in just a second. Got a ton of them to discuss. But there's Scott's email and my email as well. We're both totally available for answering any questions. Thank you so much, Scott, for coming here today.
Oh, it's my honor. As you can tell, fundraising auctions are my passion and my vocation. And if I can help other people raise the money necessary to continue the good work and impact the lives of others, I'm happy to share.
Fantastic. And don't forget, we are going to, this is on part 2 of a three-part series. Part 3 is going to happen on January 31st. I should have put the date up here, but don't forget to register. It's going to be all about fund to needs, special appeals, how to incorporate that into your live auction to make sure the whole thing flows. And it can often be the most important part of a live auction portion of the event, and can oftentimes raise the most money if you do it right. What do you think, Scott?
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of the trend. And to do it right, it doesn't happen by magic. It needs to be planned. It needs, there's components to it. Talk about momentum and transition and emotion. And there's so many moving parts to this. You can't just stand up and say, who will give me $100? That doesn't work. You have to build up the compelling reasons why, and without taking too long. And that's what we're going to talk about at our next webinar.
And that's January 31st, same time, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Check out u.winspireme.com/timeline part 3, or it'll also be up on our website, winspireme.com. So please register for that, and we'll also include it in the email along with a recording of this webinar as well. So with that, we are going to get to some serious Q&A here. We have a ton of questions that I want to get to. Are you ready, Scott?
Yes, sir.
All right. Got a ton of events, so we're going to start back at the Divide and Conquer. How do you handle Divide and Conquer with an outside event of 600 attendees where it's under a big tent?
The same way I do if it's in a ballroom. I work in tents a lot. And you do it the same way. You're just a little more challenged because you may not have the walls. But you do it the exact same way. Set it up as a production. Set it up so that you have smooth transitions. Bring the people in. Give them a compelling reason to listen. And you're going to do it the same way, whether it's in a tent or not. And of course, the biggest part is to have a proper sound system. It takes more sound in a tent because the sound escapes the tent. So you've got to spend the money and have a proper sound system in order to divide and conquer, if you will. You want to be able to whisper and get people to still hear you, because you can't yell at them. They don't want to be yelled at. So a sound system is absolute key to doing what you're talking about right here. I hope that helps.
That's great. And with the turning the music on between the silent auction and the live auction, do you recommend having a music on during the silent auction and then turning it off to invite people into the room, or is it better to have no music during the silent auction, turning it on to invite people in? That was a good question.
It is. It's a very good question. And typically speaking, I'm going to have it on at first as the people start filling in the room during the silent auction. And as soon as we start reaching critical mass, I'm going to turn the volume off, or at least way down and probably off, because the music ends up just being a little bit of white noise in the background. People aren't really paying attention to it anyway, but they talk louder because they need to be heard over the music. And once people start talking louder, they tend to continue to speak louder, even during the live auction component, even during the dinner. So we want to keep the noise level down to a little bit of a minimum. Plus, if we don't have the music, if we can't turn the music up, we're not going to get that transition effect. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn it off at some point. But when I turn it off, I don't turn it off abruptly. I bring, just like lights, when you bring them up or when you bring them down, do a 2-minute fade. Don't flip them on or flip them off. Do a 2-minute fade, and people don't notice the transition nearly so much. They just know, hey, it's darker in here. Hey, it's more light in here.
Right. I think that's a great suggestion. So music to begin, but then have it fade out during the silent auction and to a point where there's no longer, and then you can use it as a key to transition. That's great. So thank you for that question, Sam. And that first question, Melissa Snyder, I know you're a participant in these webinars a lot, so good to see you back here.
Can I just jump in for a moment? A question should be about the band and their music. The band can absolutely kill your live auction as well. The band is used to playing so that people dance. And if they get the feedback from the audience that people want to dance, they think they're doing the right thing. No, we're burning up the crowd's energy. When the dinner's going on, they need to play dinner music. They might play a couple of songs in the early beginning, but then we want to clear that dance floor and get everybody seated. We don't want people dancing. I got a horror story about the band that just kept rocking it. And then all of a sudden we were trying to do the live auction and get people to sit down to eat, and they didn't want any part of it. They were having fun. And it killed the event. It killed the event.
Right. Every minute counts.
Yes, it does. Be strategic.
This one's from Bart Darfler. The triangle of influence. What about the floor room layout where a dance floor basically splits the room?
Well, thank you for noticing, because that happens a lot, doesn't it? Two things. One is if you can put the band's dance floor over on the side of the room, that's the best. That's the best, because that dance floor takes up a lot of valuable real estate right in the middle. But let's say there's no way to do that, and we have to have the dance floor there. First of all, don't make the dance floor any larger than it really absolutely has to be, all right, because it's valuable real estate. What I would do is I would put the biggest money. So if I'm on a dance floor like that as an auctioneer, I'm not going to work from the stage. I'm going to work from the dance floor. Even with 500 people in the room, I'm still going to work from the dance floor. If I have 700 people in the room, I'm going to put a riser in the middle of the dance floor that's going to be taken down right afterwards so that I can see a little bit better. But the money should circle the dance floor. The second tier of money should be the tables back from there, with the largest amount of money being at the end that would directly face the stage. That's where your biggest money is. It's also a great place to put in rectangular tables. If everything else is round, that's a great place for rectangular tables. It kind of separates out the bigger money from the other money. So that works as well. But you're going to surround the dance floor. Your triangle has now become a U.
That makes sense. That's great. Thank you for that question, Bart. This question for Anna, or from Anna Seghetti. Where's the best place to seat honorees if they're not in the triangle of influence?
You want the honorees where they're close to if they're coming up on the stage, put them close. Well, it depends. For the most part, you're going to want them. Their moment in the sun is going to be when they're on the stage. So put them close to the stage so it's easy to get them onto the stage. And that's where they're going to be honored. They don't have to have, the best seat in the whole house.
That's good. So maybe just off to the right or left. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. There's exceptions to every rule. Because if they have star power, maybe you do want to put them at a special table. But mostly you want it to make an easy transition for them to get on and get off the stage. So the transition is smoother. Yeah.
That's great. That's good. Thank you for that.
And don't forget, they also have to return to their seat, and we want to do that because we want everyone's focus to be on someone else, not on the guest of honor at that point.
That's a great point. Thank you for that, Anna. Susan Pierce, this is a great question. Men are great at live auction with wanting to be seen, but our event is 98% women. They want to talk during dinner, not have the auction. How would you handle this?
That is a great question. Well, they want to talk, okay? And now when the dinner is over, and now when do we start? It all comes back to timeline. And I tell you, a real component of the timeline is when do you want the event to end? Or a better question is not when do you want it, it's when should it end so that you're keeping the energy within the room and then work backwards from there. If it's a luncheon, you've got a little more wiggle room. But when do we want it to end? If it's a luncheon, though, typically speaking, you want the live auction to end at 1 o'clock. So if people are working, they can still get back. They can still leave and get back to work. But auctions are like snowflakes. No two are alike, and you just have to work it accordingly. But look at your timeline, figure out when it needs to end, and then go backwards from there. And remember, focus on the fundraising, not the friend raising. We hopefully can do both at the same time.
That's great. Got a couple questions here. One from Libby Richardson about our caterers tells us 20 minutes per course, and we have 3 courses, with dessert, which equals a whole hour. I mean, what do you recommend to deal with that? More than 2 courses, and or what do you suggest speaking while people are eating? Go ahead.
Well, here's what we can do with that. First of all, if you do preset salads, we just save 10 minutes. Okay, that's if that was your first course. So we just saved 10 minutes right there. And don't listen, that's the Scott Robertson philosophy on that. The dinner entree is going to take its 20 minutes. When the last entree touches the tables, go ahead and start. During the live auction, it's certainly permissible to serve dessert. The waiters do not, speaking on behalf of the auctioneer, the waiters, clearing and moving, that does not affect the live auction because we're only dealing with a few people each time, and it's fine to go ahead and do that. The only time we don't want movement in the room is during the special appeal. But the desserts can certainly be served. Now, one thing we want to do is let's serve that dessert to the table. Don't put the desserts in the back of the room. Don't put the desserts in the back of the room asking people to get up, move back, get a cup of coffee, get the dessert. We've ruined the whole moment. So the desserts have to be served to the table. It depends upon how many auction items you have. You can serve dessert afterwards if you have like 4 or 5 items. But if you're going to have 7 to 12, then just go ahead and serve dessert and make sure that the movement isn't going on during the special appeal. But it doesn't bother me for that to happen during the live auction. My spotters and myself will move. If a waiter should happen to be blocking someone's view, we'll move so it's to the appropriate spot. I hope that's helpful.
That's great. This one's from Aya Leslie. Do the dinner attendees know what the live auction items are prior to the dinner? So what's the best way to inform them ahead of time? And let me say just a couple things on that. Promoting your live auction items is one of the most important things you can do prior to the event ever even starting. And there's so many free resources for doing that nowadays, especially with social media. Posting your live auction items on your event page or your nonprofit page, and as you procure them or as you secure them, and then posting about them continuously is going to get people keyed in and notified about it. Also, email marketing campaigns using MailChimp or Emma or Constant Contact. as you are sending out emails encouraging people to buy tickets, you can also include, auction item sneak peeks of your biggest and best live auction items, so that people know what they're going to be bidding on prior to attending the event. Same with invitations, right? If you're sending out save the dates or invitations, you can include on the back side, a small portion of the invitation showing some of the auction items that are going to be there. But pre-promoting your live auction items is one of the most important things you can do. Scott, maybe you can tell us a little bit about something you can do at the event, so that people maybe are aware of the live auction items prior to the live auction starting.
Sure, and you're so right. Remember, we don't want people to come in and impulse buy live auction items. We want them to impulse spend on live auction items and spend more than they thought they were going to. But we want them to know. And if you're using social media, I recommend sending out the live auction items one at a time. Don't give them the whole load all at once. Now they're comparing each other. We want to send them out one at a time on a daily basis with a schedule leading up to the event. So that people can go, oh, did you see what they're going to have? And then you get people talking about that particular item. Night of the event, your social hour, your cocktail hour, your silent auction time is a great place to have a PowerPoint slide running continuously on screens or on televisions with our monitors within your silent auction, so that people can walk up and see them. And it just runs on a continuous loop. It's also a great idea is to put sponsors on that loop, so they're getting more play and not just getting thanked over the microphone. So it could be a live auction item, it could be a sponsor, another live auction item, and a sponsor. And you cannot have too many pictures. And if you can change the slides up so that each item had like 5 different slides at some point, that's even better, because people are seeing something different. You should also have the list on every table. If people don't have a catalog or a program that lists all the live auction items, put that on the table. If you have high tops at the dining tables, the seated dining tables, if you have high tops in the silent auction, put them in acrylic frames and set them on. We don't want to play hard to get. You can also have those posters that you made and have them as people are walking toward the silent auction, have them as people walk by so they can see what items you have up for sale. Once everyone has entered the room, move those again into the silent auction area so people can, once again, see those items. We don't want to play hard to get. We want to educate people as much as we possibly can.
Definitely don't include prices on those posters. We removed our suggested retail value from our PDFs and display materials a long time ago, actually about a year and a half ago, because of this very recommendation. We realized that was putting that ceiling on, but just having that display out there in front of people as they're sitting down is going to key them in on what they're prepared to bid on. So thank you for that, Scott. And this is great. Sorry, Susan Councilman, and sorry all you ladies out there. It's Adam Levine, not Adam Levine. I am terribly sorry about that. So correction noted. Thank you, Sue. From Joe Loon, do you include heads or tails, centerpiece auctions, other auction games during your live auction? And will you also discuss raffles and the placement of that?
Do I play heads or tails? Only if I can avoid it. Only if I can avoid it. Heads or tails, popular around the country. It's a game of chance. I'm personally not a big fan of it, but all events are different. I do play heads or tails on occasion. One thing you want to be careful, and let's talk about raffles, and let's talk about selling the centerpieces, which was a great idea a few years ago. I want you to look at your previous years, and I want you to see how much money you brought in on the raffle. I want you to see how much you brought in your centerpieces and how much energy you brought into the room and money that you brought in on heads or tails. Now, I always had to be careful about talking about heads or tails because I personally don't care for it, but some people, they love it. And it's something they do every year, and people love it, and they've got all kinds of ways to do better things about it. But here's what I'm going to recommend, and I already started, so I'll go back to it. That is, figure out how much revenue you're bringing in from this, how much participation, active participation you're getting from this, and put a dollar value and see, is it worth it to do? If it is, then absolutely 100% do it. But if it's like, yeah, we probably ought to change it up and do something different, then you may want to revisit it. I personally am not a big fan of raffle tickets because I think it lets people donate a little something and get out of the way. I was at an event one time where I was not the auctioneer, and someone came up and they were selling tickets for it was supposed to be a $300,000 event, and they were selling raffle tickets, 1 for 5 or 3 for 10. And with that, you got a little blinky pen. And so I said, I gave the guy $10. I said, so for $10, you won't come back and bug me anymore? Oh, no, sir. And for $10, he went away. That was about 10 years ago, and I still remember that. Because your raffle ticket salesmen, to be effective, are a little bit obnoxious, and they're a little bit in people's faces. And you have to think, is it worth the $3,000 we raised from the raffle in order to justify them approaching everyone in the room when we're trying to raise $50,000? It's a question that you have to ask. And don't draw raffle tickets during the auction. Save that to right after the auction before we finish with the Flourish.
That's great. That's great. And, there's a lot of different, I know there's a lot of different auction games and fundraising games. Like, and one auctioneer who's particularly good at it, and really well, as Scott, is Danny Hooper. He comes up with the zaniest ideas for all these, different ways to raise money and mix it up. But what he always brings it back to, right, is that focus on fundraising. And he makes sure that if he's going to play a game or do something, it has a fundraising goal in mind, and it is going to at least get near it, or if not, accomplish that goal. It's not to raise an extra $500 to $1,000. He's doing that extra game to mix it up and raise an extra $5,000 to $10,000. So always make sure that you, I think Scott put it beautifully, you recognize what you're going to get out of it and the effort that's going to go into it. Right? I think that's a really important thing to know.
and in defense of all the folks who it depends. Auctions are like fundraising events are like snowflakes. No two are alike. So just know your audience. And, sometimes if we have 300 people in the room, we need to make sure we get money from all 300 people in order to achieve our fundraising goal. I know I probably throw out bigger numbers than most, but it's because I tend to work high-end fundraising events. But they're all relative, and you just have to figure out what are we going to, and you can make the budget ahead of time. What's it going to take to obtain our fundraising goal? And don't let the tail wag the dog. If selling raffle tickets is a great idea for your group, then do it. If it's not, then I wouldn't do it. But it may be a key component, and everything else that I've said you're going to discount now because you're like, well, he doesn't know because we do really well with the raffle. Then God bless you and keep doing it. And if I did your event for you as your auctioneer, I'd encourage you to do it too. But do the math and see if it works.
I love it. That's great. This question from Kelly Feldman. Who do you hire to make your slides and timeline work? There's definitely, it always depends on your, the size of your staff and volunteers. But if you can get anyone who is familiar with PowerPoint, it took me, I literally put that slide together within 5 minutes of, if anyone who knows how to use PowerPoint should be able to take any sort of template that we handed out here today and replicate that across auction items. And then it's just as simple as hitting one key and going for it. So, especially any younger people who have used PowerPoint maybe in their classes, definitely tasking them with putting together the PowerPoint presentation. And as far as the timeline, hopefully you've taken some of the tips here today, and you can start to put together a more detailed timeline yourself. But Scott, do you have any recommendations for who you might hire in order to do that?
Well, that is the job of your professional fundraising auctioneer. They should be the first people. That's the person who should help you with your timeline. I don't create timelines. But I was on 2 different phone calls today evaluating timelines. I like to take what someone else has already done and then tweak it accordingly, as opposed to just creating the timeline. If you have a draft to start with, at least you've got something. And then just think it through and re-listen to this podcast. Think about how it flows from one to the other in the transition. And as Ian said about PowerPoint slides, I bet you that with 2 hours, if you've never done a PowerPoint before, if you can watch 2 hours of YouTube videos and then produce this PowerPoint slide in 2 more hours. So 4 hours of someone's time, and possibly a whole lot less than that if you're, computer savvy and you understand PowerPoint. It's really easy, and man, the results can be so impactful. People hear so much better when they can see it.
And if you think about the whole event production and all this time that went into the centerpieces and the lights and the drapes and all of these incredibly time intensive things, and then people are sitting down at their tables and you are at the pinnacle of the event and you have this huge screen that everyone is paying attention to. Talk about time versus worth. Putting in a small amount of time into your PowerPoint and making sure that the right slides are up when people are there is going to go so far in terms of improving the amount of bids that you're going to get. So it's absolutely worth investing a little bit of time to making sure that PowerPoint looks great and also works the way you want it to.
Absolutely. And, it's a great way to thank sponsors, too. You can say Ajax Concrete, or you can put a sign of Ajax Concrete up. You can put the picture of Ajax Concrete, especially with the CEO who happens to be in the room. They love to see themselves. Give them what they want.
Right. That's great. And you can have the PowerPoint going, when the live auction isn't, on, before they sit down, you can have sponsors going, images from your cause. It's just a great, kind of background thing to really add to and remind people, why they're there and what they're doing. So great question, Kelly. This question, and we got a few left here. We're just going to keep going. For those of you who stuck around, thank you so much. We encourage you to keep coming. This will be included in the recording, but we're just going to make sure that we answer everyone's question here. Darlene Kopeski, do fundraising auctioneers typically know how to start the bidding in a live auction? And do you have any recommendations for in terms of what amounts to start at?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, the answer is yes. If they're worth a darn, they know where to start the item. And they may not know before the auction where to start the item, but they'll know during the auction of where to start the item. Everyone gets excited about where are we going to start, where's the amount, where are we going to start? And they try to tell me sometimes that haven't worked with me before. They try to tell me where to start. And where we start has no bearing whatsoever on where we finish, except for the fact in bid increments. Let me give you an example. If someone says, well, we want this to start at $5,000 because we think the value is $7,000, I can't get any momentum. So if I started at $5,000, one person bids $5,000, someone else bids $6,000, someone else bids $7,000, I'm done. Okay, I'd be much better served if the item's really worth $7,000. Starting it off at $2,000, now $3,000, now $4,000. So you want to start low enough so that you want to start low enough where it's a no-brainer price, and then ramp it up rapidly. $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, and now $7,000, now $8,000. Sold it, $7,000. We're able to ramp up some momentum. Now, if an item is worth, let's say it's worth $15,000. I'm not going to start it at $1,000 because the only place to go from $1,000 is I can increase it to $2,000, I can increase it to $1,500, but I can't go any different because of the bid increments. Okay, $1,000 now, $2,000. I'm going to wear the people out before we get to $15,000. But in that particular situation, I'd probably start it off at $5,000 where $5,000 now $7,500, $7,500 now $10,000, $10,000, $12,500, $12,500 is bid enough $15,000, add $15,000, $15,000 now $17,500, $17,500, sold it, $15,000. But your auctioneer should know how to do that. And, you can have input on where you think the retail ought to be, but trust your auctioneer to know what to do there. I hope that was helpful.
No, that was a great question, Darlene. From Joanna Gosney, will there be a webinar on online auctions? Perhaps. Stay tuned. Thanks for that question, but nothing scheduled as of now, but that is noted. From Leah Craig Pfizer, the timeline didn't include a donation paddle raise. When would you put that in the timeline? The answer is it's during the live auction, but we're going to be talking about that in part 3, all about the fund in need and or paddle raise, also known as the special appeal. So definitely register for that coming up on January 31st.
I will tell you that is absolutely typical, but it's not an all absolute. So we'll talk about that in the special during our next segment. So you need to tune in because I'm going to tell you when you can do it, and it's not part of the live auction.
Great. Let's see. Did you have anything to add to that? Or
no, I was just trying to do a little bit of a cliffhanger.
That's good. I liked it. No, that was great. Hannah Nordwall, we have found our biggest complaint is too loud of music right after the auction, and there's no time for conversation. How do we compromise?
Oh, my goodness. Some people are going to complain about almost anything. I guess the simple solution is that you turn it down, or you only turn on the speakers that are near the stage or near the dance
Right.
floor where people are going to be dancing. And so you can unplug some speakers that are all over the room. I guess that's a situation. My rule of thumb when people complain about things at an auction is that I go right to the donation list, and I look to see who gave the most and who gave the least. And the people that complained, if they're up at the top of who gave the most, I listen to them with 100% flexibility in mind. If they didn't give anything, but they're there to tell us how we did it wrong, I don't give them much credibility.
Right.
So that may sound a little
It's good.
harsh, but
good.
that's how I look at it. But I think
That's
the way
another-
to do it would be to work with the speaker system and then plug some of the speakers. You can, all those
Right.
speakers are self-powered, and you can turn them down.
Right. No, that's good. That's a good compromise. But you
And
don't
they may,
want the,
and they
the
may
tail
have a
to-
legitimate complaint too. So
Right. Yep. But you don't want the tail to wag the dog too. So that was great. Thank you, Ann. Cynthia Klinger, she asked about the special appeals, but also what happens if you have consignment items and they do not get enough money to cover the cost for the organization? How do you handle that? Do you even start the bidding below the consignment price, or do you start at 20% above?
now you're asking me for my secrets. I'm going to start it below the consignment price because of that same reason we talked about earlier, so that we can get people, so we can flush out the people in the room who are likely bidders. I always say that I bid on behalf of the charity, and if I'm not getting the bids that we need, then I help it along. That's how I like to call it. But I bid on behalf of the charity to get it to the point that it needs to be that we can sell it.
So you actually kind of insert bids that might not be there? You let a plant in the back of the room bid, or what do you do?
I like the way you phrase that better. I insert bids that may not be there because we can't let the charity lose money. We're not going to do that. So we have to insert bids where needed in order to get it up to a price that we feel comfortable selling it. We're not going to lose money, and a good auctioneer knows exactly how to do that.
Well,
Because what you're doing is you're bidding on behalf of the charity.
Right. And if you don't get a bid that's above the consignment price, do you just move on to the next item and say, thank you very much for that one, on to the next item? Or how do you...
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just say, 15,000, perfect, and we're moving on. Because I feel a little disingenuous if I say sold, but I just say, and we're moving on. And away we go.
I think that was great. So thank you for that question. Patricia Hegg, how do you handle table assignments, the triangle of influence, when 99% of event attendees are guests at sponsor tables?
99%. I think I wouldn't hold the event, and I'd just get all those sponsors to pony up.
Right.
Again, the same way. Look at your historic bidders. And see who's been supporting in the past. If it's XYZ Bank and find out who they're going to be sending, you can ask that question. It's okay to do that. And if they're going to be sending their bank tellers, they came for two reasons. One was food and the other one was drink. And they'll be the entertainment. Don't put them dead center because they'll be the entertainment and then they'll leave early, and nothing's worse than a table that leaves early that's up front dead center. So I would look for historic bidders and ask who within, if you're XYZ Bank, are your main people going to be there? And if they are, then you set them up front. If they're not, then I would, just look at historic bidders and historic participants. That's what I would do. But
That's
I
great.
tell you, if it's all sponsor tables, it's great if the sponsors attend, but if it's not, it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
That's great. Thanks for that question. Judy Jacobson, quickly on this one. We're having a dessert reception followed by a live auction and musical presentation. How does that impact the timing since we're not serving dinner? That kind of goes in hand with, I think, perhaps I've gotten a few questions now for people who ask about if they do have a buffet or stand-up reception. What would you recommend?
Well, I tell you what. Let's handle them one at a time. The dessert reception, I would treat the dessert like it was an entree, so that I could have everybody seated. They get served the dessert. When the last dessert touches the table, then I would start with the live auction. So you're pretty much treating the dessert as if it were the entree, and your timing would go along, would go along the same way. The dreaded stand around. It's a challenge. This is a challenge. First of all, you probably want to have some reserve standing tables, some high top cocktail tables with reserved on them, so that they're reserved for certain groups who are your historic bidders. But it all comes back to divide and conquer. And you're asking, if you're having everybody stand up during your live auction, you're asking for movement in the room. And movement in the room does not lend itself to great fundraising. So I try to avoid if at all possible. And if it's not possible, you do the best you can, and you try to get the auctioneer as close to the people as possible, but on a riser so that they can be seen. And then hopefully the people gather around the auctioneer, much like the way they do a football coach, except instead of them taking a knee, the auctioneer gets up on a stand, so that they're able to see people, and then hopefully everybody kind of gathers around. It works. I've certainly done it, but then they sort of form a horseshoe around the area. But it's not idea. Idea is divide and conquer, get the people seated.
I like it. Okay, great. Just got a few more questions here. A couple I'm just going to go through really quickly. Kimberly Rowland, you asked about advertising live auction items online prior to the event. Definitely do that. How soon? You can do it, as soon as you're selling tickets. So maybe a couple months in advance, especially leading up to the event, the 4 weeks leading up, make sure that you're hitting not only your online, but on, in terms of maybe an online auction, but also on your Facebook, social media, Twitter, Pinterest is also great. And then email newsletters are a must for anybody who's already purchased tickets. Get them excited about the live auction items. Sending them one email a week with little sneak peeks are always a good idea. Kimberly Ike,
yeah, and then a week before the
event,
event, send all the items out to people so that they have something where they can see all the items, and you're not onesie-twosying it then.
Yep,
and Ian, I wanted to back up
point.
for just a moment. Another thing that we can do if we have a stand-up group, you can do a little bit of theater. You can take chairs and put them in theater style. Reserve some of the chairs for people that need to sit down, and for people who are your historic bigger bidders, and then people kind of group around the theater. I mean, if you had 200 people and you had 50 chairs, that would probably be enough. You don't have to have a chair for everyone, and then people can they can sit down or they can group around. Doesn't lend itself to a long auction, but it can certainly work. Is that you set up chairs in theater style. Just make sure that you put an aisleway down the center so that people have two different ways of getting into their chairs.
I like it. That's great. Kimberly Ike asked for the timeline. We're going to be sending that out along with the recording, but you can also download it right now in the handout section. Meredith Ellis, she talked about her school fundraiser this year. We're having a family-style dinner for 100. Would you suggest starting the auction during dinner, not after? We're thinking dinner would be a distraction. If you remember back, we recommend starting the live auction 120 seconds after the last entree is served, so that the people, and serving the money first, so that as soon as they're finishing up, they are ready for the auction, and then the people towards the back are just kind of starting into their meals, and it's not a distraction for those who will be bidding.
Well, and I would probably wait in that particular situation. I would probably wait until most of the passing has been accomplished and then start. Because if you're saying, please pass the mashed potatoes, and the auctioneer is going 25.
Oh, family style. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would probably wait for the majority of the passing of the pots, if you will, the serving dishes, and then start.
That's a good point. I'm glazed over the fact that it's a family style. So yeah, that is kind of an additional distraction there. So good point.
And and one of the things that you're going to want to do at that particular event, where you only have 100 people and it's family style, it's more intimate. So your auctioneer needs to come out and visit with the tables ahead of time, and then merge into the live auction. Don't come out and hit it with 1,000% of energy. Merge into the auction. So it's like someone just came to your home and started with the conversation with the rest of the family. They didn't come in with a hammer and saying, "Pay attention to me now."
Right.
But
That makes a lot of sense.
But think about the intimacy of it, and your auctioneer should, plan accordingly.
I think that's great. Anna Wilczwecki, that's a tough name. Sorry about that. You don't recommend sound for the... What's that?
I said it's not as hard as Levine.
Yeah, true. Beautiful name, though. You don't recommend sound for the live auction PowerPoint slides. How do you feel about a few packages being introduced by a 30-second video? Do you recommend? And if so, should it be silent? How does that work?
That's a good question. And it depends upon the item. But if it's, let's say we're doing an aerobatic fighter pilot for a day, then I would put Highway to the Danger Zone on, and I would show what you're about to do. And in 30 seconds, yes, we absolutely can do that. Wouldn't want to do that for all the items, but for something that needs the animation, like a fighter pilot. A fighter pilot, a jet on the ground looks like a jet on the ground, but a jet in the air, that's the experience. So I'd probably do that. I would probably do that. It's just that it's very hard for the music to be heard over a PowerPoint slide. It just doesn't work when everybody's noisy. So,
like it.
Videos can be good as long as they're short and impactful.
I like it. A couple questions here from Jan Hawkins. Do you usually recommend runners to send in winners from the silent auction during the program? And what are your thoughts on pre-check credit card information at registration?
Pre-check credit card information is absolutely the best way to go because it's going to expedite checkout so much. And for the people who donated in the special appeal, they don't have to stop by checkout. You can get 100% participation, and nobody has to stop by the checkout, which is a great thing. It made checkout easier. Remember those 3 questions? Yes, for sure. Silent auction, running them in. Realize you're going to interrupt the live auction when you do it. However, it probably needs to be done so that people don't leave not knowing if they got the silent auction item or not. Another way to do it is that when you close the silent auction, people know right away, if it's paper and pen, they know right away whether they got the item or they didn't get the item. They can come by and look because you did 3-part forms and you leave the form there. But in the interest of communication, yes, you probably should do that. You probably should... And I would recommend that you don't put people's names on the forms that you're bringing in to show who won the live auction or the silent auction items. I would just use bidder numbers because if I ended up buying 6 items in the silent auction, I'm going to hear tomorrow, wow, Scott, you bought a lot of items in the silent auction. Blah, lots of different things there. So I would just use bidder numbers. And then if somebody figures it out, well, good for them. But I would do that. I would do that. It's good communication.
Great. Just 2 more questions here. For those of you who maybe we didn't get to your question or you still have questions for us, put up our email addresses here on the screen. Definitely send us an email, and both Scott and I will love to get back to you. But just 2 more questions here today before we wrap up. Let's see. Sheila Todd, what do you recommend or what do you think about online bidding prior to the auction, whether it's live or silent?
Everybody has a different opinion upon this, and it depends upon the event, and it depends upon how many grandparents you have out there and people who are going to pre-bid. My personal experience has been that online bidding sounds great, but mostly all it does is it gives us a starting point for live auction items. It just gives us a starting point, and they're immediately outbid in the room. That has been my experience. There's exceptions, of course, to every rule. For silent auctions, I think it's a great idea because people can be bidding at home while this is going on. Trying to do it during the live auction is very cumbersome. I've done it. It's quite cumbersome. But I think bidding at home is for grandparents and things like that, it's good. But as far as starting the auction early, it depends on the situation. But most of the time, I find it to be ineffective. Now, that being said, this trend may change in the future. And it may have already changed. I just haven't personally seen it.
And does it?
But
I mean, because wouldn't
grandparents love it.
it dictates the starting bid for your live auction items, wouldn't it? And don't you want to have more control over that? Like
Well,
if the online bidding
right.
got to $5,000 and it's a $4,000 item, you wouldn't necessarily want to continue trying to bid on the live auction.
Well, and that's what I would do in that particular situation is I would start it at $3,000 on behalf of the bidder who did the online auction, and then I'd hit somebody in the room at 4,000. Hopefully, I'd bid for the person who bid online at 5,000 and look for 6. That way, I'm representing them. Right? It's all transparent. It's all right there. Everybody can see it. I've bid on their behalf, and now if somebody wants to outbid them, they can. But I haven't just started at the opening, at the amount that was bid online. So
That's good.
You're getting to the same place. It's just a matter of being able to build up momentum. And it gets a little sticky because I'm sure there's a few people out there that just crinkled up their nose and said, well, Scott, if they already bid 5,000, we should start at 5,000. Well, if that's what you want the auctioneer to do, then tell them that, and that's what they'll do. I find the momentum helps out an awful lot as long as you're doing what's fair, just, and right, and honest. I don't do it if I only do things that are honest, and I think that's the most honest way to make that happen.
That's great. Cool. Last question, and we got a couple more questions. From Wendy Vase about do you address the ask even during the live auction, even though it's an interruption? Again, we'll address that in our next webinar, part 3. Make sure you register for that. u.winspireme.com/timeline part 3. We encourage you guys to join us for that, and you can email us any questions here. Last question from Michael Sable: is it beneficial to run the PowerPoint? Live auction PowerPoint throughout, like while people are eating, or do you wait until the live auction? And do you only do sponsors before? Yeah.
Yeah, I would run it for a portion of the time during the live auction, but I wouldn't keep it going all the time because it suddenly becomes visual clutter, if you will. If you've run through the slides 5 or 6 times, that's probably enough. If not, it's just busy. And we don't want it to be busy. But we want everybody to know what we're selling. But let's, only do it for a little while, and then when it starts feeling busy, just, reduce it down and then start again.
Or switch to sponsors.
Yeah.
And
I would put sponsors. Yep. I would put sponsors in with the live auction items so that people are looking at the auctions items and they notice the sponsors. It's just a nice plug for the sponsors.
Very good. Awesome. Well, with that, again, I want to thank you, Scott. Thanks to everyone out there who joined us here today. It was hopefully you gleaned some great knowledge for your event, maybe coming up this spring or maybe next fall. Who knows? But I encourage all of you to join us again for the Funded Need, which is honestly can be the most important part of your fundraising event. That's why we wanted to set aside a whole separate part for it. Aside from the live auction. Thank you, Scott, for joining us here today and sharing with us your knowledge. We'll be sending out a recording of this whole webinar, hopefully this afternoon or maybe tomorrow. And with that, thank you so much, Scott, and we hope to see you guys next time. Yeah.
Well, Ann, thank you very much. It's my pleasure. And one thing I just want to make sure that everybody keeps in mind, the things that Ann and I have been discussing, they're not absolutes. They're our perception based upon experience, but every event is different. Auctions are like snowflakes. It varies according to the region of the country that you're in. It depends upon the history of your event. So just because we say something doesn't mean it's an absolute for your event. You may have a much better idea that works better for you. And with that, I bid you adieu and look forward to seeing everyone when we talk about Fund the Need, Special Appeals.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. And thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.